Hello, I'm delighted to be here talking to Sarah Crawford-Bohl, who I met through LinkedIn, and we connected. We had then an opportunity to have a quick conversation with each other, and I asked Sarah whether she'd be willing to have a recorded conversation with me. Now, Sarah is a healthcare professional and has a very good TEDx talk out, which is on the main TED website now. You can look it up, and it's all about the power of silence, but in actual fact, it's about the power of speaking up and not remaining silent. And I think, Sarah, we might start the conversation there because in the course of writing the imposter phenomenon and my PhD research prior to writing the book, I found that the inner conversation in our head sometimes said that we shouldn't speak up. And I wonder what inspired your TED talk and how that might link into maybe any imposter feelings, whether they be yours or what you think about that for other people.
Oh, thanks, Kate. Thanks for having me here today. It's great to reconnect. So, I think that the reason why I chose that particular topic is myself, like many of us out there, have met our share of bullies, whether that's the bully on the schoolyard in the schoolyard where we perhaps felt picked on in elementary or primary school. Or even if it's meeting, someone who perhaps didn't necessarily have our best interests in mind, those are difficult moments, I think, that shape us into who we are today. They can either build us up and help us to become stronger and help to shape how we treat other people in a more positive way, or they can tell us that our voices don't matter. They can tell us that we don't matter. And as I became a healthcare leader, I started to think about how I can support my team to be and the people around me and including myself to be the most confident version of ourselves. Because I think when when we're feeling like we can handle what is in front of us, even if we don't know what to do, but rather if we can say, you know what, I'm going to figure this out. If we have that confidence within ourselves, then we will ultimately be more effective as a leader, whether that's formal or informal, or we might actually be even more comfortable in our own skin and more happier with how we show up in the world. And so as I love to read, I'm a bit of a leadership nerd. I love to read leadership books. Hence why I'm very excited to read your book, Kate. But I found that there was a bit of a gap in the literature out there. There's a lot of tools on how to have a difficult conversation.
Mhm.
So once you're in the conflict, what do you say? What don't you say? How do you what's your demeanor? But there is not a lot out there on what's going to get you past that hesitation that almost all of us feel to actually have the difficult conversation. So I had to do a bit of the the self the self review, the self searching of my soul to say, what is it that really helps me to have the difficult conversation, to get past that fight, flight, fear, fawn, that automatic reaction that tells us, oh no, I'm going to just avoid that,
Yeah.
to get ourselves to the conversation.
It's interesting because part of my PhD research, as you know, the main focus was on the imposter phenomenon, but the adjunct concept that came with that was this term psychological courage. And it's
Yeah,
this courage
yeah,
inside that you draw on to do the what is right. I know in your TED talk you use the North Star, that guide to doing what is right. And I think for me that sort of has that parallel with being courageous to do the right thing, but also to speak up when you know you should speak up, to use
yes.
your voice when you know it's the right thing to say something. But it can be really difficult. That's the point that I find is so hard to draw on that courage at certain points in time, particularly as you say, if you're facing, not just the school bully, but the corporate bully in this day
Yes.
and age.
Yeah, absolutely. That there's some really wonderful research out there by Amy Edmondson and others on psychological safety. And I think that that gets us to a certain point. It helps us to see the importance of it, particularly in creating psychological safety for those around us. But the nuance that you've called out, which I think is really important one, is about psychological courage, which I love the definition of courage, which is acting in the presence of fear,
Mm.
not necessarily acting in the absence of that, because inevitably we will find ourselves in positions where we need to speak up. or we should speak up. And the world is not always going to be creating environments that feel safe to do so. So it's really upon us to have the courage to speak up, to advocate for ourselves or others, even when the perceived safety is not there. And so I really think that this is about us in our personal worlds. How do we address moments of conflict with our children, with our spouses, our partners? How do we speak up in the workplace? In healthcare, that's more important than in many venues for the safety of the patient, for the safety of the staff. But there are many venues that ability to face the fear and speak up anyway,
Yeah,
where that's important.
the good old Susan Jeffers book from many moons ago is Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. You know,
Do it
that's a
anyway.
lovely title, and it is part of that. And as you say, courage being this doing the thing that needs to be done despite the presence of fear. But then you mentioned psychological safety, and I find that a fascinating concept. I too have come across Amy Edmondson's work and read her books. But there's something about how do you create
Yes.
psychological safety that I mean, everybody's taught, I say everybody, but lots of people, let's say, are talking about this concept of psychological safe spaces. And I remember
Mhm.
going back many moons ago, I used to work for Barclays Bank, and I worked at a branch in Cambridge which had 3 floors, and the management team were on the top floor. So as
Yes.
I walked up the stairs to the management team, one morning I found the stairs were actually littered with these little posters that said, "You are now entering a safe zone. You are now entering a safe zone." And it made me
Wow.
really wonder, was the zone not safe beforehand? You know, they're trying to make it a psychologically safe space, perhaps. This is back in the late
Yeah.
1990s. But
Hmm.
it's this piece, it just didn't feel like you were truly entering a safe zone. It just felt like there was something stuck on the wall. And I think there's quite a challenge in creating these psychologically safe spaces, really making them safe rather than just lip service to it. Have you got any suggestions on what we can do rather than just the lip service?
To create the psychological safety.
Yeah,
Well, just to piggyback on your point, we can say, excuse me, choking.
bless you.
Pardon me, choking on my coffee. I think that we can say as much as we wish that this is a psychologically safe space. This is, you hear it in meetings. This is a safe space. I want you to feel safe to speak up. That's wonderful. But whether the person that we're connecting with will actually feel safe or not has a lot to do with the space that I'm working hard to create and the space that they find within themselves. Do they feel safe or not? So I think that we all have a part to play in creating the psychologically safe space, creating it for ourselves in our internal environment, and then creating the safe space for others. So, but good questions around what's really important. I think in terms of creating a psychologically safe space, for me, a big one is curiosity.
Mm,
If we as people, whether that's a formal or an informal leader, create a space where we demonstrate curiosity, learning about the other person, I think that's a secret, a superpower when we're trying to create a psychologically safe space. That includes if you're in a leadership position and someone comes to you to ask for advice, it's very easy for us to just go ahead and tell people what to do versus, tell me what you think you'd like to, what would you like to do in this situation? What do you think is the right thing? Giving people the opportunity to bring their best selves to work or to the space, I think goes a long way. I think that the transparency is also a big one for me as in whether that's in personal or professional space is really showing my authentic self. If I have an air, if I put on my armor, which a lot of people do in a space, then people can feel that armor and feel like, oh, okay, they're protecting that she's protecting herself versus me
yeah.
demonstrating some vulnerability. I
Yeah.
think that also goes a long way. It looks like you've got a thought.
Yeah, that's so interesting because there was something about the curiosity that sprang to mind as you were talking about that. And that is being curious. And if you're asking somebody for their views and telling them that it's safe to speak up, you've got to do it without being judgmental. And I think human beings, we're naturally judgmental. We naturally go, oh, that won't work in our heads. But we've got
Yeah.
to sort of maintain an interest, that curious mindset, and try and suspend the judgment. I think that's a challenge, but I think it's important to do. And then that second point, and I was just now trying to think what was I bringing on to your second point. Do you want to remind me just as you
Let's
finish?
see if I say about the authenticity and
Yes,
vulnerability.
yes, yeah. And the armor, that was it. It
Oh,
was
the armor.
the armor piece, because what came out in my research on the imposter phenomenon, people talked about donning armor to be able to cope with situations. So there was actually a lot of pretense, a lot of armor being put on. And I know
Yeah.
I myself have definitely done that. And one of the things I do, and I'm wearing a jacket today, it's actually making this conscious effort to, okay, this is Kate in sort of the professional mode. The armor is then on, so it presents me well, and therefore I won't get found out. There's something, I think, sometimes that the armor does that to support us and to build our confidence. But then there is this point about maybe we can put on too much armor and we come across as cold, or not as empathic as we really want to be.
Yes, absolutely. There's a wonderful book by Gervais Bush. It's called Clear Leadership. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it. He talks about a tool called the Experience Cube. It's a tool that is used to have a difficult conversation. And within the tool, there's 4 key elements. I'm sure there's way more to it, but as I understand it, you speak to your observations. What am I seeing in this moment? You speak to what you think about it. So 2 different pieces. This is what I see. No judgment,
Yeah.
no interpretation, no personal opinion. You get there when you start to dive into your thoughts. What do I think about the situation? What do I like or not like that I'm seeing or experiencing? And then what do you feel? And what do you want? And I think those 2 elements are very powerful. So what do you feel? We often use the language, oh, I feel that. That immediately speaks to a thought. You're not talking about mad, sad, glad, fear, the big 4 feelings or your body sensations. But if you can actually avoid diving into the thoughts in that important element of sharing with someone how you feel, that puts the armor down for a moment to really connect, having that human to human connection, human experience this is what I'm feeling. And then that last element about what you want. It is also an armor. It's a moment to put aside your armor and really share what you're looking for. What is it that we want to experience? And in my TEDx talk, I use a similar framework, a different angle about how to get you to the difficult conversation. And it's really about trying to understand your experience. What am I seeing that's getting in the wrong way here? And how do I try and get myself out of that armor moment to think about what might be going on for the other person and how having a difficult conversation might benefit me, but also might benefit that other person, might be a supportive action for them. And
Yeah.
getting into that empathetic space where we start to think, gosh, if I'm having a difficult moment here, that other person is probably having a difficult moment too. Helps
Yeah.
me put down my armor if I get out of my own head and start thinking about how I might support someone else, what might be going on for them, getting into that curious space, and then finally thinking about how can I be more curious in this moment than I am? Because when we've got the armor on, we're probably more like, I don't hear it, I don't see it, I'm not going
Yeah.
to think about anybody but myself.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that sounds really, really powerful. So that was the Experience Cube. Can you just say the author again?
Oh, yes. Gervais, I believe it's Gervase and then Bushe. I
Okay.
will double
Yeah,
check it.
that's okay. That's okay. But Gervais Beige or something like that.
Bush.
Bush.
Hmm.
Okay, fab. Thank you. Because when you were describing it, it had connotations and links to work and research and training actually that I've experienced myself on non-violent communication, which is
Yes.
Marshall Rosenberg's work. And
Yes.
I remember going up to Findhorn in Scotland many moons ago. Absolutely beautiful place. It's a very quirky community that you spend time and you're immersed in for I think a slightly longer than a weekend. So sort of about a 4-day workshop conference by this wonderful chap, Marshall Rosenberg, who's no longer alive. But NVC, non-violent communication, is his terminology that he uses. And it's
Mhm.
like the words can be violent, as in we make judgments and we can be quite
Yes.
harsh with our words. So his aim is to suspend the judgment, to hear cleanly what the other person is saying. So rather than make the judgments, hence, like you were saying with the experience cube. But
Yeah.
the interesting thing is he did exactly the same thing. You said, I feel that is
Yeah.
not a feeling. I feel frustrated that
Yes.
you are, that is a feeling that you're naming. But often I feel that you are not. That's not expressing a true feeling. So he was really clear about the expressing of feelings. But also the last thing you then about what do you need? Making requests. And I don't
Mm.
think we're that good at articulating our own needs and our own requests of what I think also perhaps just because we don't know what we want. I think
Yeah.
sometimes we don't spend the time, to actually
No.
think about what do I really want? I want to be heard, so how do you request that? That's perhaps something I don't know, it's just springing through my mind as we're talking.
Oh, absolutely. Even you think about New Year's resolutions. Here we are,
Mm,
January 2026. And I think that there's a lot of people who try and think about, okay, I ask it around the dinner table. I get it, people poke fun at me because I'm always asking, what does this next year hold? Or what's your 5-year plan? Is a classic Sarah question. And it's very difficult for most people to think about what they actually want. What do you want? My daughter is about to go into university. What do you want to do?
yeah,
Oh, what a difficult question it can be,
yeah,
particularly now. I think it's getting even harder for people to identify what they want. And when we're used to instant gratification on our personal devices, I think it makes it even harder for us to think beyond the next minute or beyond the next few minutes. What do we want? So in a difficult situation, in a situation where we're not feeling psychologically safe, when we're trying to find the courage to speak up, it can be difficult to know what do we want to say. So we're
yeah,
having a bit of a framework to use to guide the conversation helps, but it can also be very difficult to try and determine to get past that feeling of impending doom, which I think a lot of people do. If I've got the moment to speak up, most people fear retribution. They fear a negative consequence of speaking up. They fear that they're going to make a mess of it, that they're going to say something wrong, they're going to offend. Um, all those things come into mind. So how we try and get past that really is to get curious ourselves. Get curious about what am I feeling? What am I seeing right now? What is the trigger I'm experiencing? Because oftentimes we are seeing something that is it brings us right back to childhood, something we experienced as a wee one, that
mm,
this sort of unearths an old pain. So
yeah.
sometimes it's helpful to look back and say, get curious about our own experience, get curious about what might be going on for the other person, because they're having something similar going on for them too, likely.
Sure, sure, absolutely. And I think there's also something about having somebody by your side. Albert Bandura, in his research, terms it social persuasion. I guess the colloquial terminology would be cheerleaders. Having somebody that's going to
Yes.
help give you that encouragement, that's going to give you that little bit of a
Mhm.
push to say, look, you are the right person to speak up. You are the right person to tackle this conversation or to make this presentation or whatever it might happen to be. And I think there's something about having those cheerleaders and being willing to ask for them to help and support you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Isn't it amazing how much we can take on when someone's got our back?
Hmm.
Whether that's a boss, a family member, a friend. If someone's there beside us, figuratively or literally, to take on a difficult task, have a difficult conversation, or to reach for our dreams, it makes it so much easier when there's someone cheering us on.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we use the term cheerleader, as I mentioned in my TEDx talk, sometimes that gives some sort of negative connotation. People don't necessarily want someone there with the pom poms all the time, uh, and they don't necessarily want that to be something that is it's the word I'm looking for, Kate, sort of a not authentic, I guess.
Yeah.
It's, you know,
Yeah.
they want the cheerleading
Surface
to be,
level of they're there, pat on the
yes,
head sort of. Yeah.
thank you. Absolutely. They want it to be authentic. They
Yeah.
want it to be someone
Genuine.
who's going to, yes, cheer them on in a way that's comfortable for them. And so it's hard, it can be hard to find that right cheerleader. And so I think when you find them, it's totally okay to say, I'm having a vulnerable moment here, or I'm
Yeah.
about to experiencing a tricky situation where I feel vulnerable or I don't feel safe. I'd like a pep talk.
Yeah, and
And
the
you know,
interesting thing is with the imposter phenomenon, some people
mm,
can inadvertently make it even worse because we have this fear sometimes that we're not the right person, that we don't know enough, that we're not good enough, or whatever. And somebody goes, "Oh, but you're brilliant. You're amazing at what you do. I've seen you speak before. You'll be fantastic. I've got no worries about you. You'll be absolutely fine." And inside, when I've had that sort of encouragement, I've gone, because it makes it even worse. There's now the pressure from that person. So
oh
the
yeah,
cheerleading doesn't want to be the rah-rah pom-poms. It's
yeah.
more about, I think, that they're helping somebody understand why they're really good at what they do, how they've got to where they've got
Mhm.
to, and to give that proper support to help somebody understand that. Again, coming back to this psychological courage, to really have the courage to accept how good they actually are at things rather than dismissing all of the positive feedback. And I think it's really interesting because cheerleaders can be too, I love the phrase, the pom-poms. I think,
Yes.
that they can be too pom-pommy rather
Yeah.
than actually genuinely helping with structure and support for the person.
Absolutely. I had a boss once who was very good at this. And when I was studying him really, trying to figure out what it was that he did to create that balanced cheerleading experience for me. Why was it that I knew he had my back? Why was it that I felt strong in his presence to take on difficult things? And when I really boiled it down, there were three elements. One was that there was acknowledgement and recognition, two different things, however, I think there's a distinction. And then the last one being gratitude. So acknowledgement, recognition, and gratitude. And so the acknowledgement is really, I see you. I
Right.
see that you've done that. Recognition is about, it's like gratitude but different. I think it's about saying that you, what you've done has meaning, what you're doing has meaning, you as a person have meaning. And then the last one being gratitude, which is a bit more personal. It's a bit more of a thank you. I am thankful for what you've done. I'm thankful for how you're showing up. And so when it comes to having a difficult moment, that I see you right now in this moment. I see that you're having a difficult moment. I hear from you that you're having a difficult moment or you're needing some support. The acknowledgement and of saying that I know that that's okay. We are perfectly imperfect beings. You can be really strong, Kate. You are an incredible speaker and author and writer. And it's okay for you to be in a moment where you're not feeling strong,
Yeah.
where the psychological safety is missing for whatever reason. You hear people like Tony Robbins sometimes has to, he's got a whole routine that he does before he goes out on stage to get him into that confident space. So if Tony Robbins is needing it, then the rest of us, I think it's totally okay for the rest of us as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And then that last one of being, really thank you for sharing your difficult moment with me, Kate. Thank you for being willing to be vulnerable with me. I think that trifecta of those three things really helps. Does that resonate with
Yeah,
you?
fantastic. Definitely does. And it also links into Brené Brown's work, doesn't it, on that
Oh, it
level
does.
of
Yes.
authenticity. And one of her early books that I read and still think is, for me, perhaps it's because it was one of the early books that I read, was The Gifts of
Mm.
Imperfection. And
Ooh,
it's just, yeah, perfectly imperfect. And again, because my lens is on the imposter phenomenon, this want to get things right, want to say the right thing, be perfect, to look great all of the time. That's not humanly possible. And I have put, I know you're going to be opening the book when you go on your holidays, very shortly, but in the very beginning, in the introduction, I've put, this book is not perfect, but it is written. And it's one of those
I
things
love
that
it.
I could have spent a lot longer trying to cut some things out, rephrase things, change things, whatever. I wrote it the best way I could within the time available. That's the other thing, I think, because the do your best, you just don't know how long you've got to be able to do that. So I think doing what you can within the time available is really important, rather than trying to make things perfect, which is impossible. So
It
yeah.
is. I agree that the vulnerability truly is a superpower. I
Mm.
think the more we can be vulnerable with ourselves being okay, Brené Brown's work on shame really links in with this as well. Is okay, I'm okay to be not okay right
Yeah.
now. That's okay. It's a human experience for us to have moments where we don't feel great, and that doesn't mean that I'm not going to have great moments. The psychological uh, safety, the imposter phenomenon, these ideas that it's okay for us to not know what we're going to do and how to do it all the time. And that doesn't mean we're not a great person or great most of the time, some of the time, if we're
Yeah.
going to, be careful. But
But
no, I do think,
it's
carry on.
interesting, because it links back to something that you said at the start about the bully, and that aspect. What sprang into my mind then is a in my childhood, I was bullied at school, and I didn't speak like everybody else. So I grew up in Lincolnshire, which has quite a strong accent, where things are either consonants are not pronounced, H's are dropped, and A's are very much shortened. And I spoke posh compared to everybody else. So it was one of those things that I was bullied for. And I can remember standing in a corner with this girl about to hit me. And I don't know whether it was a teacher or somebody else stopped her from doing so. But there's times when I get taken, if you think you're going to get judged, you think you're going to get beaten up, you think you're going to get sort of told off for something. There's times when that small, shy, frightened me in the corner, it still exists. And it's a strange dilemma perhaps inside, because logically that you're not the same person. Logically that you're now an adult and in control. But sometimes you can get taken back to these experiences that are very emotionally charged, where you then don't want to speak up. You don't want to have those courageous conversations. You'd rather duck out of putting yourself above the parapet, I guess.
Absolutely. I'm fascinated by the science of hypnotherapy. The hypnotherapists, I believe, a big area of their focus is trying to tap into that subconscious
Mm,
that learns at an early age, often under the age of 7, that by doing this, I am not safe. So if
yeah.
I do that, I will experience a lack of safety. Someone's going to hit me over the head. Someone's going to ridicule me in public. Uh,
Mm,
Doing whatever that is, likely it's standing out, being slightly different. And that difference can be very, very subtle at that young age. We're quite observant little humans, aren't we? We can see, oh, they speak something different. They've got different genes
yeah.
than the rest of them.
Yeah.
And you can see it in our adolescence. You go to any school where there's a bunch of 13-year-olds, and most of the girls will have the same hair and the same outfit and the same pants and the same jeans, or same shoes. And because we don't necessarily want to stand out, we want to be part of the crowd. And
But
that
even those who want to
demonstrates,
stand out by in
yes,
my youth, you know, there was the punk era, and they stood out by putting on the punk as the look that was a certain classic look of I'm part of that crowd, but I'm
that,
being different.
yes.
But in many ways they're still being the same. It was yeah, it's fascinating, isn't
Yes, you're right.
it? Wanting to
Absolutely.
belong.
We crave belonging. We crave belonging. And then to the being willing to speak up against the norm or
Yeah,
against what's before us means that we're risking not belonging to that group, to that person,
yeah.
to this experience. And and I think that is truly often at the root of many of our of those moments where we feel like an imposter, where we feel
Yeah.
like it's not safe to speak
Yeah.
up.
And that sense of belonging or otherness again was another theme that came out in my research, believe it or not. And
Sure.
it does link so much to psychological safety, doesn't it? If you feel like you belong, that you're cared for, that you are part of the group. It doesn't mean you have to be the same as everybody else. This is the other aspect of it. I think difference and non-conformity can be really, really useful. I think there's a concept again in positive psychology, and it's called deviance, positive deviance.
Yeah.
Kim
Yes.
Cameron's work in that area about being positively deviant, because we often think of deviant behavior as this non-conformist but very negative connotation, whereas actually being positively deviant can be really useful. So yeah, and having
I
coming
love
back to this
that.
wonderful word of courage, having the courage to be positively deviant rather than thinking that we have to conform to. I think that yeah, we don't have to conform to belong. I think that's another part in my our conversation that's coming through my brain at the moment. Conformity can be inauthentic, whereas
Absolutely.
if we are authentic, we don't have to conform, and we can still belong and be part of the group as a result. Yeah.
Absolutely. Back to your question about how we create psychological
Mm,
safety, that our willingness, if we think about vulnerability as a shared experience, everyone feels vulnerable from time to time. And if we're in a space where we have the courage to show up with our vulnerability on the outside, to demonstrate that vulnerability, then it does help to create the psychological safety for others to do the same.
mm.
That creates other people say, oh, I'm feeling vulnerable, or also don't like this. How do we know if if our defiance, if our you know the defiance we're keeping in our heads? How do we know if other people are feeling the same unless we put it out into the world?
Yeah.
And how many times have you decided, okay, I'm going to share with the group that I'm not supportive of this decision, and other people say, oh, actually, thank goodness you said so, Kate, because I'm
Yes.
also not supportive. Sometimes that's your act, your courageous act is enough to help create the psychological safety for others to bring their vulnerable selves or their defiant selves to the
Love
table, their
that.
positively defiant self.
Love that. So the courageous act helps to create the psychologically safe space. So yeah, being
Yes.
willing to be vulnerable yourself to enable others to also find their vulnerability. And then through that, it sounds like also we create that sense of belonging because others are saying, yeah, me too. You know, I've had this experience or I
Yes.
felt like that, or yeah, I'm wondering whether or not it's the right thing to do. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. If you think about your closest friendships or closest family members, you know, my husband, my best buddies, they all seem to love me despite my flaws.
Yes.
And you know, these the
You could
things
take
that
out the steam, I'm sure, Sarah. You could take, and
they're
it
there.
is that, but it is, yeah, they, you know, good
Yeah.
friends do. They love you
Yeah.
despite the fact that they know you, warts and all, don't they? Yes.
Absolutely. I used to be, my ears kind of stick out a bit. When I was a kid, I was sort of bullied for the, oh, Sarah, would you fly me home? Like implying that I was like Dumbo, I could fly you home. And lo and behold, you know, my husband seems to think that they are great. And my friends think that they're cute. So there you go. I thank goodness.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's something else that went through my mind when we were talking just a moment ago about creating a space where people feel that they can speak up and feel supported by others. And this bit about getting feedback and other people coming back to sort of like the cheerleader, But
Yes.
not just the cheerleader, not just the person who's going to be the social persuader, the one that's in your corner to give you that encouragement, but other people that observe the you that shows up in whether it's a meeting or at home, but they observe the you from the outside perspective, and they then give you that positive observation. And I
Yes.
think sometimes if that positive observation doesn't meet with the internal perception, it's really easy to dismiss it. It's really, oh no, they're just saying that. They're just my best pal. They would say that, wouldn't they? Or,
Yes.
what do they want now if it's the manager giving you that positive observation?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. There's a group out of British Columbia that is called the Roy Group, and they have a framework for giving feedback that is very simple. What went well? What was tricky? And what would you like to see done differently?
Yeah.
And so it's a bit of, there's all sorts of feedback tools out there, but this one is the one that I tend to use the most. I really like it. It's better than the sandwich. You hear the
Yes.
sandwich, right? You're going
Don't
to
like
say
the
something
sandwich
good.
at all. Don't like the
Yeah, don't use
sandwich
the
at
sandwich.
all.
I can see a place for it, but I think that it's too easy for people to ignore the part in the middle because I'm really filling the time with the
Yeah. Or
positives.
just focus on the part in the middle and never hear any of the praise either. So yeah, the
Exactly.
sandwich
One
is,
or the other.
I'd like to kill the sandwich, Sarah.
Okay, so in the absence of a sandwich, what do we do? What do we do? And I love how the Roy Group says. So this is what went well. So Kate, I really liked that you did X, Y, and Z. These were things that
Yeah.
I think were really wonderful. What was tricky, which I'm not going to use what I didn't like or what was
Yeah.
bad or what didn't work, because often what didn't go well is a personal opinion. So we're kind of
Mm.
owning that. What was tricky for me was this element. And what I would like to see done differently. So you can also frame it as what would make it even better
Yes.
next time is if you did this sort of thing. I think I need a cheerleader who I know and can trust will say say the difficult things, say the things that it might give me that, put my armor on for a minute.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I still want to hear it. And particularly when I know it's someone who has my back and my best interests in mind.
Yeah. I too
Yeah.
like that structure. I think that what went well, and then you use the phrase which I've used and I've quoted in the book as well, the even better if,
Yes.
so what went well, even better if. And then there is something because my dad, let him love him to bits, but there's always, as I grew up, always been an even better if.
Yes.
Nothing is quite good
Mhm.
enough. So
Mhm.
therefore, I've
Yes.
I've had to fight now against my own internal desire, coming back to that point about perfectionism, because I've had to fight that because I know that there will always be an even better if. But
Mhm.
actually, we sometimes don't need to hear it. We just need to hear what went well, full stop. If you've got an even better if, you can sometimes keep it to yourself. I do not need to hear that. Um, Sometimes we
I
just need
love
to
that.
give what went well, full stop feedback.
Isn't that wonderful? I really agree. I've heard of cultures where they promote proud but never satisfied.
Ah,
And I can see how that has a place, that we always want to be in a place of continuous
yeah,
improvement, right? That we all want to keep learning, we want to keep looking for opportunities to improve ourselves, improve the workspace that we're in, the service we provide, the sales experience, whatever world you're in. But I'm with you, Kate. Sometimes I think there's a time and place to just share the appreciation and leave it there.
yeah.
Because it's very easy for people to think, I will never be good enough. And when people feel like they are good enough, they will show up as their best selves at work.
Yeah, yeah. And that feeling like you're good enough enables you, as you say, to have that ability to show up as your best self. There's something about pointing out strengths in people when you give that feedback to say, I noticed that your ability to, let's say, handle that difficult conversation, to state what was required next. That's really one of your strengths. Or to present the numbers in a way that people can access them. There's something about labeling the strengths that you spot in people that can be really useful when you give that what went well feedback. So people actually hear it. Because so often hey, that was great, that was awesome, that was
Yeah.
fantastic, that doesn't do anything, does it?
No, it's like asking someone on the street, oh, hi, how are you? Fine.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm okay.
yeah, I'm great. I'm great. It really doesn't give us
No,
anything. And so if you're asking feedback for feedback or offering feedback and you just say, that was great, it doesn't really give anybody much to work on. There's not a lot of depth to
no.
a comment like that. So giving a little bit more specifics around, again, what are you seeing? What did you see? How did that leave you feeling? What would you like to see? What would you want next time? This is what I
Yeah.
saw. This is what I think about it. I'm going to give you some recognition. What do you want if you need to add in the additional element of what would make it even better?
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. So acknowledgement, recognition, and gratitude. And I like the differentiation that you made between the acknowledgement and the recognition part as well. So acknowledgement for the person and what they've done, the recognition about the person. So that to me came across as who they are, not what they've
Yes.
done. So there's a difference between the two. And then being grateful for them showing up in your space. So I think that's also lovely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, well, it was good. It was good role modeling, and I'm very glad to have taken it away.
And then to come back to your TED talk that I mentioned at the beginning, because you had the compass model, and I'd just love to touch on that as well. And that moral compass. So you had the N as the North Star, and that was the guidance to do what's good and what's the right thing to do. Finding that support from others or support within yourself, to me, that's again that drawing on the psychological courage. It's the looking at that external what did I call them? The persuaders, the social persuaders in Bandura's
Yes.
work. So yeah, that external support. The empathy I thought was also really interesting. This understanding the other person and finding that empathy to set the tone right. That links very much into your W of wonder and curiosity.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. To me, those four elements encompass a lot of what we could all do more of perhaps in 2026, couldn't we, for
Mhm.
ourselves and for others?
100%. I so agree. Yes, a lot of this came from my mom. She's gone now, but she was a person who had such a strong moral compass, and her role modeling through my life with her was that to always focus on what's the good and right thing to do in this moment. If you're if you're struggling, if you're in a space where you think, I don't know what to do, what's the good and right thing to do? Because sometimes that's not self-protective. It's not putting your armor on and staying silent. Sometimes it is addressing it. And sometimes it is staying silent. Sometimes the best thing in that moment is to keep your mouth zipped because what's going to come out is not going to be helpful. And then to think about and to if I'm going to have a difficult conversation, getting out of my armor space and thinking about how I can support someone else, it gets me from that amygdala, the reactive part of our brain, into that prefrontal cortex
Yeah,
that helps us to be more logical and think, okay, no, I've got this, this is going to help me, it's going to help the other person, there's benefit for both of us right now, to that space of empathy. If I can have empathy for myself, this is a difficult moment for me, and to think what might be going on for the other person, how that really does help to set the tone. And as you said, the wonder piece is the more curious I can be about my own experience, as well as what's going on for the other person, it again is a wonderful tool to get me out of that amygdala and into my prefrontal cortex. You can't be curious and be stuck in
no.
fight, flight, or fear.
So
Or
absolutely. And I also really like the word curious. Instead of why did you do that? I'm curious to understand your reasons for that decision. And if you use the word curious, it's softer than a why. Why is so accusatory, and curiosity isn't, I don't think anyway.
No, I agree. I agree. I think you're right. Simon Sinek does a great job of start with why. He
Yeah.
uses that, but he also speaks to uh, how how curiosity can show up in a way that creates safety for others and helps to provide a compelling argument for our own experience and what we're needing. But I agree with you. I think the word curiosity does soften it, and it's a bit like the I think that versus versus being honest. If we can state what we're curious about, it does still allow us to be clear with the other person, but it shifts from a more critical, why would you do that, to
Mm.
I'm wondering, owning it ourselves as our
Yeah.
own question, not a question that the world has for you in this moment.
Yeah. Yeah. So the alternatives to I think just explore that for a moment. I'm wondering whether um how about we do this rather than I think that you are, and again it becomes that accusatory part. Is that where you're seeing the I
I
think that shift
do.
too?
I think you're right. I think you're right. And because it's difficult to say the world is curious if, or we're all curious if. Often people don't say that. If we're owning the curiosity as our own.
Mm.
So I'm curious
Yeah.
if.
Yeah.
It's a bit like owning the thought of I
Yes.
think or
Yes.
I feel. I'm making it, the I language is so important in many instances, particularly in moments where we're feeling vulnerable, or we're in a difficult situation where we're trying to prevent the other person from feeling vulnerable.
Yeah.
I think that's also a reason why people avoid a difficult conversation is we don't want someone to feel bad in our presence. We've experienced feeling badly ourselves. We don't want to put someone else into a similar situation. So if we can own the curiosity, that does help to reduce the defensiveness someone else might experience.
Yes.
Does
Yeah.
that resonate?
Yeah, and absolutely. And just to bring perhaps the conversations towards a close, but holding these difficult conversations, sometimes naming it that this is a difficult conversation for me to have. I'm
Yes.
feeling uncomfortable in raising this. Sometimes that can also be really useful, can't it? Just to state where you're at. You talk about that empathy to yourself as well, and naming it out loud can be really useful, perhaps.
Absolutely. If in many instances we want to have a positive outcome.
Yeah.
The initial reaction might be to have the talons out, that what do they say? It's like
Or the shield that says, no,
yeah.
don't hit me.
And it's normal for us to have that automatic reaction where we have that fight, freeze, flee, fawn, where we have that experience. It's truly automatic within ourselves. But once we get past that, whatever they say, 90 seconds or less, when we can try and get into that space where we're a bit more calm, having the ownership of our own vulnerability truly helps to create that relational experience with whoever we're connecting with so that
Yeah.
they can see us as a human and see us as a vulnerable and perfectly imperfect person
Yeah.
that is trying to create a connection moment with this other person.
Yeah. And Sarah, thank you for the connection moments that you've created with me during the course of this conversation. I think, acknowledging your time that you've spent, I truly want to give you that thank you, because it's been, again, another fascinating conversation, which sort of goes in lots of different directions. And I've truly enjoyed it, truly enjoyed it. But I'd love to finish by asking about 2026 for you. You mentioned earlier on one of your Sarah questions during dinner parties at this time of year is, what about 2026 for you? Is there anything you'd like to share on 2026 for you? What does it hold?
Well, thank you. And Kate, quickly, just thank you so much for the opportunity to have a connection with you. I know I reached out on LinkedIn looking to meet someone who obviously shares a lot of my goals and aspirations and passions. And so I really have appreciated the time with you and the conversation today. And so for 2026, I'm in a real moment of transition. I've been working for the same organization for 25 years and have an opportunity to make a leap into a new organization. I'm very excited to be joining an organization called Covenant Health out of Alberta. I'll be stepping into their chief operating officer position for acute and primary care, which is going to be a big change for me. I'm very excited and scared to take on such a new opportunity, but I'm really excited about it. So I'm really perfect timing to be making a leap at the beginning of 2026, where I look back on all that I've been able to experience over the last 25 years of my career, and to look forward to learning a lot in this 2026 year. I think I'm going to learn a lot. I'm going to be stretching myself and meeting a whole bunch of new people and seeing about where the future will take me with this new organization. So I'm very excited to do that. But I'm heading off for a vacation with my family. It'll be a transition time for all of us. So I'm looking forward to helping my kids and my husband through this transition too. We'll be doing it as a team, which is an absolute honor. So, and I look forward to reading your book, Kate. I can't wait. I look forward to sharing what I learn with others.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that would be brilliant. Pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. All the very best then for the new role, and enjoy the downtime before you start that. I think the nervous and the excitement is very justifiable. And I think if you hold on to that sort of level of, actually, I'm excited about this opportunity, it can help us cope with the nerves too, can't it? So yeah,
We sure can. Yeah,
have
exactly.
fun
It's, don't
through
they
it.
say?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited. Thank you again for the time.
Oh, thank you
I
for
look forward
yours
to staying
too.
connected.
Yes, definitely. Thanks, Sarah. Oh, I don't want to end the meeting. I want to stop the